Texas Tech quarterback Brendan Sorsby admitted to breaking the NCAA's gambling rules, yet he is somehow eligible to play this upcoming year. Those rules included betting on his own team. In almost any era of college sports, that would have ended the conversation. But in 2026, with NIL money, athlete lawsuits, mental health arguments, and state courts challenging NCAA power, Sorsby is now back on track to play for Texas Tech after only a 2-game suspension. This is no longer just a gambling story. It's a story about whether the NCAA can still enforce its most basic integrity rules. The Brendan Sorsby situation is one that transcends all sports. This is not just a discussion about what is happening for Texas Tech and in the college football world. This is a circumstance of a player who openly admitted that he bet on his own team multiple years ago, and he was caught. And somehow, a local judge just ruled that he can play this upcoming year. Let's backtrack to where this all started. Cincinnati quarterback Brendan Sorsby entered the transfer portal. He was one of the most highly touted players in the portal, and he opted to transfer to Texas Tech to be the quarterback for the Red Raiders. He had high grades from the NFL over the course of the summer and is being projected as a potential first-round pick. Now, despite all this hype, his future was called into question because he was being investigated for violating the NCAA's gambling rules. There was an investigation that was ongoing, and in the process of this, he checked himself into rehab for a gambling addiction. Now, he very clearly did have some sort of a problem because his betting was rampant. He was betting on sports all over the place. He was betting up to $90,000 over the span of his college career. Very clearly did not have a lot of control of his behavior. But he was using the gambling addiction seemingly as a crutch. The one major glaring issue with this is not the fact that he was betting while he was playing, which is still a violation of the NCAA's rules. It's the fact that he was betting on the University of Indiana football team when he was a member of the team. That is the one major no-no when it comes to the integrity of competition. But the one thing that is forgotten about and not brought up enough, Brendan Sorsby tried to make the argument that he didn't make any bets on Indiana that wasn't public information. He didn't bet against his teammates. He also made the claim that he was just trying to be closer to his teammates. He was trying to support them. When in reality, he actually placed bets on the under for the starting quarterback of Indiana's passing total and also a first half under for the Indiana Hoosiers. So despite claims that he did not bet against his own team, he very clearly did exactly that. Now, when this entire process was going on, it was very clear that the NCAA was not going to play around. One of the past examples that was going to be used for this was Iowa State quarterback Hunter Dekkers, who was deemed ineligible and had to go to the JUCO route and is now, ironically, in the UFL on the Houston Gamblers. I'm not even joking. Go look that up. Hunter Dekkers is on the Houston Gamblers. Probably the funniest thing that I discovered with this whole thing. In an effort to save his eligibility, he hired Jeffrey Kessler, who is a well-known lawyer in the sports world. He was the lead litigator for the House case, and he's been quite successful. He's also been in a number of situations where he has worked on cases that have involved players' eligibility in various leagues and trying to fight punishments. So he hired the right lawyer, and that worked because Judge Ken Curry, who's the second judge put on this, provided or ruled on a temporary injunction. Sorsby's argument was the following. He was clinically diagnosed with a gambling addiction. His gambling was tied to underlying anxiety and compulsive behavior. He accepted that he violated the NCAA's rules. His lawyers also argued that the bets did not create a true game-fixing integrity threat, which is still total BS in my opinion, because he did not bet against his team, he did not play in the Indiana games that he bet on, and he did not use inside information. Again, I pointed out the 2 bets that he made, says otherwise. You're telling me that you're not taking the under on your starting quarterback's passing yards if you don't have some sort of information? If you want to support your team and you're not using inside information, take the over. I would love to know if that was a circumstance where a banged up quarterback was playing. Was there a situation where they knew that they were going to run the ball more? Something doesn't add up there. The lawsuit also accused the NCAA of failing its obligation to protect athlete well-being, arguing that the organization responded with delays and information demands instead of compassion. Now, ultimately, what came from this was the judge ruled that it would be irreparable damage to Brendan Sorsby and his career if he was not able to play for Texas Tech this season. And I think that the judge completely disregarded the irreparable damage that he just did to the future of athletics, college athletics specifically. We're going to get to that a little bit later on, but he just opened a Pandora's box of future litigation for any situation, any circumstance that a player does not feel satisfied with something that didn't go their way, whether it was them breaking a rule or them being out of eligibility. They can now just sue. They can now just take the NCAA to court. And if the NCAA doesn't have the power to shut down a gambling case, then what do they have the power to do? Again, we're going to talk a little bit about that at the very end here. Pete Thamel did come out that Brent Yormark, the the commissioner of the Big 12, came out with a statement. He said the ramifications of today's ruling are significant and could have broad impacts across college athletics, creating great concern amongst our membership. I've been consulting with our key stakeholders and have scheduled meetings with our conference ADs and executive board this week. We are also in touch with Charlie Baker and anticipate the NCAA to appeal the order in the next 24 to 48 hours. We will continue to monitor and evaluate the situation. So this is not done. This is not a ruling on the case. This is simply an injunction that delays the inevitable. The actual case is going to be heard in February after the college football playoff, the national championship, is done and played. Now, what I've been really compelled by, really has caught my attention. There's been a lot of great reporting by many of the beat reporters in college athletics on the opinions of key stakeholders in the sport. Ross Dellinger, Dan Wetzel, shout out to the RIP, the College Football Inquirer, used to be the producer on that show. Ross did a really good job with getting some really great quotes, and then Dan got a really, really good quote as well. This first one comes from Ross's piece from Gene Taylor, the Kansas State athletic director. We've had some serious conversations about it in regards to not playing Texas Tech this upcoming season because Brendan Sorsby will be on the field. There's still a lot to be discussed. We aren't scheduled to play them this year, but it's something we have to look at from a college football perspective. This is greater than the Big 12. So it sounds like members of the Big 12 are talking with one another on if they're actually going to play Texas Tech or not. This is a continuation of the quote. It is absolutely devastating for him to be able to play when every other sport, no matter the level, deems an athlete ineligible or they are punished severely for betting on their team. This comes from this quote from Georgia Athletic Director Josh Brooks. I think there needs to be serious conversations about not playing Texas Tech. This is another person in a different conference who has this opinion. Playing Texas Tech in any sports. He's also on the NCAA football oversight committee. So this isn't just a random AD chiming in. This is not about Texas Tech. Sounds like it is. It's about protecting our own locker room. We cannot, in good conscience, put our student athletes on a field where the competitive integrity of the contest is compromised and overridden by the courts. If a state court wants to dictate eligibility rules, they can play themselves. This was an anonymous Big 12 athletic director that said, this is the lowest point in my time in college sports. It should be ashamed of itself, meaning Texas Tech. And this was one remaining one before I get to the quote from Wetzel's story. If there's one thing that could unify a divided Congress to pass a law that gives the NCAA more authority to govern itself, it might be a court prohibiting the NCAA from banning athletes who bet on their own games. That is from Tulane sports law professor Gabe Feldman. And I think that's probably the best point with this is that with the Protect College Sports Act looming, passing, this might be the extreme situation that needs to happen in order to give the NCAA its power. But this is the one quote that made me go, oh my goodness. An anonymous Big 12 coach told Dan Wetzel of ESPN, if this is the precedent, then I owe it to my players to bring in people from Las Vegas to teach us how to gamble. Then collectively, We need to decide which games we play hard in and which ones we don't. And I think that that's actually an apt reaction. It's hyperbolic, but that's a legit take. If you're a coach and you're trying to get an edge and you're trying to do what's best for your players, no one's actually going to do this, but this is how you should respond. If a player can bet on his own game, if we can bet on our own games now, why aren't we just going out there and doing that, making as much money as we can? Lining our pockets. Now, I know that is not the identical circumstance because you would need players who are not participating in the game to bet on the game, and you're essentially indicating that you would throw a game. But it plays in all this. If you are not willing to punish, or sorry, let me rephrase. If the NCAA is not capable of punishing the lightest extreme on the scale, how are they supposed to be able to punish the furthest extreme, which is somebody actually point shaving and affecting the outcome of a game? This is going to create a ridiculous situation that I can't even predict what it'll be. Who is now looking at this case and thinking, should we sue the NCAA over that? Tyrann Mathieu came out today. I know that it's not really that crazy of a situation because we've had former athletes try to come back and play recently with Charles Bediako, but he came out and was saying, does he have a chance to play? Can I just sue my way into getting onto the field? Is this the world that we now live in? And I get it that this judge is not as local as some of the other local judges that have helped cases go in said school's direction. He was brought in after the first judge very clearly had an affiliation with Texas Tech. This guy did not. But it gets to a certain point that if these things are being decided not on the federal level, they're being decided on the local level, then the NCAA is cooked. And if there are no rules, then this is not a sport anymore. College athletics are not sports. It is a free-for-all. I am just so bothered by the fact that the irreparable damage that was claimed to be done to Brendan Sorsby, if he was not allowed to play, is being focused on one singular person and not on the greater good of every single athlete that is played and done the right thing and is going to be playing in the future and is specifically this upcoming year. Brendan Sorsby did this to himself. That is the thing that I think everybody needs to acknowledge here. He's not getting the opportunity to take ownership for his mistakes. How does that help a young man move on? How does that help a young, early 20-year-old make a mistake and grow from it and get better? Our early 20s are loaded with making stupid mistakes. Now, not everybody does it to this extreme. A lot of people don't get caught. But because he's Brendan Sorsby and this was such a public case and the way that it has been framed, for some reason, some people don't want him to be held accountable. If this was a different situation, if this was a drinking addiction, if he was an alcoholic and he was driving and he got pulled over, nobody got hurt, didn't get into an accident, nothing bad happened. But he got caught drinking and driving way over the limit. Is he just going to get let go because of the fact that he admitted that he had an addiction? Is there not going to be any consequence because he admitted he had an addiction? No, his license needs to get taken away because he is a risk. And he also violated something that was something that he was allowed to do. There was a privilege. And he's spit on that privilege. That's the dumbest part about all this, is that he had the privilege of earning $6 million to go play at Texas Tech and to be a college football player at the FBS level. And he spit on it by violating one of the most blatant rules that he can't violate. We'll see what happens from this. I'm hoping that some sort of sanity does prevail. But comment below, what do you think should happen with Brendan Sorsby? Hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. We'll catch you later.